Hey guys, tonight we begin with a story that is, at first glance, about books, but really it's about obsession, peculiar genius, and a man who decided that the entire world's knowledge deserved numbers. Yep, numbers. Because apparently alphabetical order just wasn't cutting it. So, dim the lights, get comfortable, maybe grab a pillow, and let's float back to the late 1800s, where libraries were chaos incarnate, and one man thought, yes, I can fix this with math. Our protagonist is Melvil Dewey, a young librarian in the United States. If you've ever wandered through a library and admired the seemingly infinite rows of books, you probably owe him a quiet, sleepy nod. Dewey was born in 1851 in a small town in New York, a bright child by all accounts, though probably more hyper-focused than your average human. He didn't just like reading, he liked organizing reading. And by organizing, I mean cataloging every single book in the universe according to a system that only he could initially understand, and then, eventually, the rest of us would be forced to learn. Now, Dewey wasn't your typical librarian. Of course not. He was ambitious. Ambition in the 19th century usually meant some combination of climbing a social ladder and slightly terrifying everyone around you with meticulous lists. For Dewey, it meant inventing a way to categorize knowledge that hadn't been properly categorized before. This is pre-internet, pre-Google, pre-everything. People would just wander the shelves, pulling books at random, hoping for the best. If you wanted a book on mushrooms in Mongolia, well, good luck. And of course Melville thought that was unacceptable. So, he set out to create a system that could encompass all human knowledge. His approach was, let's say, methodical in an almost absurd way. He divided knowledge into 10 broad categories: 000 for general works, 100 for philosophy and psychology, 200 for religion, 300 for social sciences, and so on up to 900, which included history and geography. Simple enough, right? Except he didn't stop there. Each of these categories could be subdivided into 10 more, and each of those into 10 more. By the end, every book had a 3-digit number, sometimes with decimals, so precise it would make an accountant weep with joy. Now, you might think that creating this system was a casual afternoon project, maybe a few sketches on a napkin over tea. But no, Dewey was tireless. He had meetings with fellow librarians, scribbling out charts, debating endlessly whether mathematics should fall under science or general knowledge. Of course it should be science, you might think. But no, someone suggested it could belong in 000. Because why not double down on confusion for a few months before getting it right? And he considered the aesthetics of the numbers. Some numbers just looked better on a catalog card. That's right, design mattered. Speaking of catalog cards, Dewey invented those too, or at least he popularized the modern system. Imagine hundreds, eventually thousands of little index cards, each containing information about a single book. The cards were meticulously arranged in cabinets, drawers sliding open to reveal perfectly aligned rectangles of knowledge. And Dewey didn't just stop at organizing the books themselves. No, he also introduced filing rules for the cards, ensuring consistency so rigid that it probably made his coworkers want to cry quietly in the corner while pretending to shelve fiction. You have to picture the library at that time. Endless rows of shelves, books stacked haphazardly, librarians sighing, readers losing their minds. Dewey would stride in, armed with his decimal system and a ruler, silently judging the chaos. And slowly, inevitably, order emerged. Books could now be found. If you wanted a book on Roman law, you could go directly to 340. Anthropology? 301. Even obscure topics had a number. Libraries became, for the first time, navigable mazes rather than insurmountable jungles of paper and dust. But of course, Dewey's life wasn't all neat numbers and filing cabinets. He was ambitious, and ambition often comes with a dash of eccentricity. For one, he tried to reform spelling in English. Why spell through with 7 letters when 3 would do? In fact, he tried to reduce English to a simpler phonetic system. Most people ignored him, a few tried to comply, and a few quietly rolled their eyes while filing books in 641.5, cooking. He also had an unusual approach to social interactions. Some say he was charming, others say he was persistent to the point of annoyance. Dewey believed in efficiency, in speed, in exactitude, in everything being in its rightful place, including people apparently. He was famously strict about punctuality, expecting coworkers and students alike to adhere to schedules with the precision of a Swiss clock. Perhaps unsurprisingly, he was also obsessed with notation, writing down every meeting, every thought, every conversation, as if someday someone would find a decimal value for human interaction. Let's drift back to his system, though, because this is where it gets both impressive and, in a way, hypnotically tedious. Dewey didn't just create numbers for books, he created a philosophy of organization. The system assumed that all knowledge could be ordered logically, sequentially, and reduced to a decimal number. In theory, this was perfect. In practice, humans being humans, there were endless debates. Should psychology be 150 or 158? Should music be 780 or under arts? And of course, Dewey had an opinion. And if your opinion disagreed, well, you might find yourself reclassifying cards at 2 a.m. questioning your life choices. By the time he finished, libraries in the United States and eventually around the world were adopting the Dewey Decimal System. Today, you might glance at a library shelf and see 641.9 on a cookbook about desserts and think, ah yes, the subtle elegance of decimal-based organization. You might not notice that behind every number is a story of obsession, tiny arguments, and the slow, deliberate transformation of chaos into calm. And so, as we float through the quiet aisles of libraries, past card catalogs and neatly numbered books, remember the man who made it all possible. Melvil Dewey, born 1851, obsessed, meticulous, slightly eccentric, and ultimately the reason you can find that book on Mongolian mushrooms without losing your mind. All right, let's gently float back into the world of Melvil Dewey. By now, he had his system mapped out, card catalogs carefully filed, and libraries starting to look like places where humans might actually find things without wandering aimlessly for hours. But of course, no story about Dewey is complete without acknowledging the quirks and obsessions that made him, well, him. So get cozy, adjust your pillow, and let's meander through the slow, meticulous corridors of his life. Dewey, as it turns out, had opinions about absolutely everything. And by everything, I mean everything. Punctuation, capitalization, spelling, library shelving, and even how librarians should behave in society. He believed in efficiency, order, and speed, not just in books, but in life. Some say he could spot a poorly filed book from 3 shelves away. Others claim he could recite decimal numbers in his sleep. We'll never know for sure, but it's safe to assume he probably tried at some point. One of his lesser-known obsessions was spelling reform. Dewey hated irregular English spelling. Who doesn't? But he took it to extremes. He proposed simplified spelling rules, encouraging people to drop extra letters. Through became thr. though became th, and enough could just be enough. Some libraries tried to quietly support him, most people simply ignored him. But imagine librarians correcting each other's spelling mid-conversation, while also deciding whether a book about insects belonged under 595 or 590. Tedium never sounded so methodical. And then there were the meetings. Oh, the meetings. Endless gatherings of librarians, all convened to argue over the smallest decimal point. Dewey was relentless. If you thought scheduling a board meeting in 2025 was a headache, imagine attending one in 1880, where discussions about the proper classification of cultural practices in Polynesia could go on for hours. By the end, everyone was either exhausted or perfectly aligned with Dewey's obsessive logic. Either way, progress was made. Slowly. Very slowly. Perfect for bedtime listening, really. But Dewey wasn't just about numbers. He also had ideas about library design, furniture, and how people should interact with books. He introduced open shelving, allowing readers to browse freely, a radical concept at the time, when libraries often kept books behind locked counters. He believed in accessibility, in the democratic idea that knowledge shouldn't just sit on pedestals. Of course, his system also meant that knowledge came with a decimal label, so democracy was neat, orderly, and numbered, but still a step forward. At the same time, Dewey's personal life was, let's say, unusual. He was ambitious and charismatic, but his charm could be overwhelming. He founded the Lake Placid Club in upstate New York, a retreat for like-minded librarians, where debates over cataloging systems mixed with social events. Some accounts suggest that Dewey was relentless in his pursuit of perfection, sometimes to the detriment of social norms. Guests at the club reportedly had to adhere to strict schedules, with quiet hours, early breakfasts, and, of course, discussion sessions about classification. Imagine going to a summer retreat expecting relaxation and instead being lectured on whether architecture should be 720 or 730. Not exactly spa material. Let's drift back to libraries for a moment. The Dewey Decimal System spread slowly but surely across the United States and eventually internationally. Europe had its own cataloging traditions, but Dewey's system was compact, logical, and slightly addictive. Libraries loved the simplicity, numbers instead of long, confusing subject headings. Patrons loved it, eventually, once they learned the system. Students could now find textbooks without wandering into the realm of hopelessness. Researchers could track down obscure manuscripts without losing their minds. And librarians, well, librarians mostly learned to accept that Dewey was both brilliant and mildly terrifying. By the 20th century, the system was everywhere. Libraries from New York to London adopted it. Melvil Dewey became a household name in library science, though perhaps not in ordinary households, because let's be honest, the guy who invented 500-something for natural sciences isn't exactly dinner conversation. Yet his influence was profound. The way we access books, categorize knowledge, and even think about organization owes a lot to his obsessive mind. Now, let's pause for a moment and consider the sheer tedium and meticulousness of his work. Imagine spending hours, days, weeks, meticulously arranging thousands of tiny cards, deciding which decimal is slightly more appropriate than another. Dewey approached this as an art form. Some might call it obsessive, others might call it a form of meditation. Either way, it is hypnotic, perfect for slowly lulling the listener into a calm, sleepy state. And of course, Dewey had his critics. Not everyone adored the system, especially initially. Some librarians resisted the decimal idea, preferring alphabetical order, traditional subject headings, or whatever method made their current life slightly easier. There were heated debates, memos circulated, and subtle acts of passive resistance, like misfiling a book on purpose to test Dewey's patience. He noticed. He always noticed. But instead of losing his cool, he simply documented it. Every error, every misclassification, every dissenting librarian recorded in his meticulous notes. So here we are, floating quietly through the corridors of libraries past and present. Imagine the sound of pages turning, the gentle clatter of card catalogs, and the calm certainty that somewhere each book has its rightful place. Thanks to Dewey, a reader in 2025 can stroll into a library, locate a book on ancient Egyptian weaving techniques with ease, and never know the hours, the obsession, or the endless decimals that made it possible. By now, Dewey's influence had extended beyond mere numbers. He became an icon in the library world, a figure of almost mythic status. Students studied his methods, librarians followed his rules, and the decimal system became more than a system. It became a philosophy of organization, a quiet testament to what one determined, slightly obsessive mind can achieve. And so as we slowly drift through shelves of numbered books, card catalogs humming softly in the background and the faint smell of old paper filling the air, we remember Melvil Dewey, not just as a man, but as a force of methodical order, a gentle tyrant of classification, and a quiet, sleepy hero of knowledge. All right, let's gently glide back into the life of Melvil Dewey, the man who decided that every book in the world deserved a number, preferably a neat three-digit one. By this point in his life, Dewey was no longer just a young, ambitious librarian scribbling notes on scraps of paper. No, he had become a towering figure in the library world, respected, feared, and occasionally slightly misunderstood. Perfect for our slow, relaxing journey into history. As Dewey entered his later years, his energy for cataloging and organization never waned. If anything, it intensified. He continued to travel, lecture, and advocate for libraries across the United States and even abroad. Europe had its own cataloging traditions, but Dewey's system, compact and numerically satisfying, kept drawing interest. Librarians from London to Paris were curious about this strange American who thought that the universe could be reduced to tenths and hundredths. Some adopted the system immediately, while others took a more skeptical approach. Why would anyone bother numbering books when the alphabet works just fine, they wondered. Dewey, naturally, responded with polite but firm insistence that numbers are more elegant, efficient, and obviously superior. Now, let's pause and consider the man himself for a moment. Dewey was complicated, ambitious, obsessive, meticulous. Those traits you already know. But he was also eccentric in ways that make bedtime storytelling strangely soothing. He founded the Lake Placid Club, as I mentioned before, a retreat for librarians and like-minded enthusiasts. There, he implemented strict schedules, quiet hours, and debates on the nuances of decimal classification. Some guests found it relaxing. Others quietly questioned their life choices while placing a bookmark in 398.2, Folklore. It's almost meditative to picture it. Soft sunlight through tall windows, card catalogs lining the walls, Dewey explaining for the 1,000th time why cooking must reside in 641.5. Dewey also had personal ambitions that extended beyond libraries. He was a champion of spelling reform, as we've discussed, and a believer in efficiency in everyday life. He believed people should walk quickly, write neatly, and, if possible, organize their sock drawers by size and color. Some of his contemporaries found this exhausting. Others admired his dedication. In our calm, sleepy recounting, it's rather charming. One can almost imagine him drifting to sleep at night with a stack of index cards at his bedside, murmuring softly about the correct placement of anthropology books. Of course, Dewey was not without controversy. Some modern historians have noted that he could be socially domineering, even difficult at times. He insisted on strict rules at his club and in his professional circles, and occasionally rubbed people the wrong way. But this was, in a way, the same meticulousness that allowed him to create a system still in use today. There's a subtle comfort in imagining a man so focused, so dedicated, that even his flaws contributed to his enduring legacy. Meanwhile, his system continued to evolve. While the original 10 main classes remained, subdivisions expanded. New fields of knowledge emerged, and Dewey's method proved flexible enough to accommodate them. Psychology, previously a minor category, grew in importance. Computer science, of course, was far in the future, but the decimal principle could adapt. The brilliance of his creation was that it was both rigid and flexible, a paradox much like Dewey himself. Libraries that adopted the system often saw remarkable transformations. Patrons no longer had to wander endlessly, lost among chaotic stacks. Students could locate textbooks, scholars could find references, and casual readers could explore topics without fear of existential despair. And all of this was thanks to Dewey's obsession with order, precision, and tiny cards arranged in perfect rows. If that doesn't make you feel a subtle sense of calm, I'm not sure what will. Let's gently consider the cultural impact for a moment. Beyond organizing books, Dewey influenced how people thought about knowledge. His system suggested that all human understanding could, in some sense, be categorized, numbered, and neatly ordered. There's a strange, quiet reassurance in that idea, especially for anyone lying in bed, drifting toward sleep, imagining a universe where every piece of information has its proper place. By the end of his career, Dewey had authored numerous books, articles, and manuals on library science. He lectured widely, advised institutions, and mentored generations of librarians. And while some might consider his obsession with decimal points, catalog cards, and spelling reform to be peculiar, there's no denying the profound effect he had on the way humans access and organize knowledge. In 1931, Melvil Dewey passed away, leaving behind a legacy that continues to quietly structure our lives. His system is still in use in libraries worldwide, guiding millions of readers, researchers, and casual browsers. It's a legacy of calm, of quiet order in a world that can otherwise feel chaotic. And perhaps that is why this story, gentle listener, is so perfectly suited for bedtime. The world may be noisy, unpredictable, and messy, but somewhere, neatly numbered on the shelves of libraries, Dewey's influence endures. So, as you slowly drift toward sleep tonight, imagine the soft shuffling of index cards, the rows of books arranged with calm precision, and the quiet, obsessive genius of Melvil Dewey. Remember that every number has a place, every book its shelf, and every sleepy historian their story patiently waiting to be discovered in the gentle, ordered world he created. All right. Let's quietly drift back into the gentle world of Dewey Decimal System history. By this point, Dewey's numbers had spread beyond the cozy American libraries, and his influence was slowly nudging the rest of the world into order. So, fluff your pillows, tuck yourself in, and let's wander through libraries in far-off places, imagining the soft rustle of pages and the faint scent of old paper. Once European libraries caught wind of Dewey's system, reactions were mixed. Some librarians were skeptical, shaking their heads at the notion that all knowledge could be reduced to neat decimals. Really? You think 641.5 can capture all the nuances of culinary history? They murmured. Dewey, ever polite but firm, would nod and explain that yes, indeed it could. And if you thought otherwise, perhaps you were misfiling your books. Slowly, one library at a time, Dewey's method crept across the continent, embraced for its simplicity and quiet elegance. In England, the first few adopters were hesitant. Libraries there were accustomed to alphabetical order or national cataloging traditions. But the charm of Dewey's system, its ability to guide a reader directly to a desired book, proved irresistible. Imagine a scholar in London, tired of wandering, chaotic stacks, suddenly finding themselves standing precisely in front of 941.5, the number for British history. A sigh of relief. The magic of organization, the gentle satisfaction of precision. Meanwhile, in Canada, Dewey's system became the backbone of many public libraries. Librarians appreciated the clarity, and readers enjoyed the predictability. If you were in Toronto in the early 20th century and wanted a book on botany, you would instinctively go to 580, knowing, without any frantic searching, that your answer awaited. It's almost meditative to picture it. Endless shelves of knowledge, all carefully numbered, all patiently waiting for the next sleepy visitor. Back in the United States, Dewey's influence grew even more. Large institutions like the New York Public Library began implementing the system, training staff and educating patrons. Librarians held workshops discussing whether music should stay in 780 or be shifted slightly. Scholars debated decimal placement for hours, soft, sleepy hours that somehow always ended in minor corrections rather than dramatic disputes. Dewey's vision was subtle yet pervasive. Order without chaos, structure without shouting, calm without interruption. And then there were the small dramas, the quiet, almost imperceptible stories that give life to library history. For example, there was a minor but prolonged disagreement in a Midwestern library about whether magical folklore should reside in 398.2 or be divided into a separate decimal. Staff members would shuffle cards, glance at each other with mild exasperation, and return to their duties. Dewey, if he had been present, might have silently noted the decimal dispute in his ledger, smiled faintly, and left everyone to their deliberations. It's fascinating, really, how much human nuance fits into a system that seems, on the surface, purely numerical. Libraries are full of these quiet tensions. The debate over whether fiction should be grouped by author or genre. The subtle argument about whether a biography belongs in history or literature. The gentle correction when a misfiled card is discovered in 641.8 instead of 641.5. All of it contributes to the slow, rhythmic, almost hypnotic life of libraries, a life Dewey made possible with his obsession for organization. Meanwhile, Dewey himself continued his work, consulting with librarians, refining decimal subdivisions, and offering advice on cataloging practices. Even in his later years, he remained attentive to the smallest details. If a book was slightly misnumbered, he noticed. If a card cabinet was slightly misaligned, he adjusted it. And if someone dared to question the superiority of his decimal system, he responded with polite yet unyielding explanations, often sprinkled with subtle dry humor. One can almost imagine him whispering, "Yes, I understand your objection, but 512.9 is simply correct," while sliding a card into perfect alignment. By the early 20th century, Dewey's system had become a quiet backbone of knowledge across continents. Students, researchers, casual readers, all benefited from his meticulous obsession. Libraries, once chaotic and unpredictable, had been transformed into serene, navigable spaces. One could slowly walk along the aisles, inhale the scent of paper and ink, and appreciate the subtle genius of decimal classification. Even today, when you glance at a library shelf, the calm order you see is a direct result of Dewey's work. That little number stamped on a book spine isn't just a reference, it's a symbol of methodical care, thoughtful planning, and, frankly, a hint of eccentricity that makes the system quietly endearing. Every book in its proper place, every decimal perfectly aligned, a gentle reminder that even in a noisy, chaotic world, order is possible. So tonight, as you settle further into your pillow, let the numbers wash over you. 000, 100, 200, moving softly, rhythmically, like a lullaby of knowledge. Imagine Dewey, ever watchful, cataloging quietly in the background, ensuring that every book finds its rightful home. And perhaps as you drift deeper into sleep, you'll appreciate the subtle comfort of a universe organized, not by chance, not by chaos, but by a man's quiet, obsessive dedication to order. All right, let's quietly drift back into the gentle world of libraries and Melvil Dewey. By now, Dewey's decimal system had stretched across continents, quietly shaping the lives of readers and librarians alike. But of course, no library is ever perfectly calm, and no system is ever implemented without its small, slow-moving dramas. So fluff your pillows, take a deep breath, and let's meander through the subtle, hypnotic world of cataloging conflicts and library eccentricities. Even after widespread adoption, Dewey's system caused the occasional debate. Librarians, bless them, could be quite particular. For example, there was an ongoing, mildly tense discussion about where to place books on puppetry. Some argued for 792.8 under stage performances. Others felt 395 under folklore was more appropriate. The dispute didn't end in shouts or dramatic arguments. No, it ended in careful reclassification, notes in pencil, and a quiet sigh of relief when consensus, or a compromise, was reached. The calm, deliberate tension of libraries is, in its own way, soothing. Then there were the eccentric librarians themselves. Some became so devoted to the Dewey Decimal System that they seemed to live within it. One librarian reportedly slept in her office occasionally, dreaming of neatly arranged card catalogs. Another would spend hours simply aligning books on shelves, straightening spines with the precision of a watchmaker. Dewey, of course, would have silently approved, or perhaps silently judged, which is nearly as comforting to imagine as the slow rhythm of a gently turning page. Dewey himself remained unsurprisingly hands-on. Even late in life, he attended meetings, offered advice, and subtly guided the evolution of his system. His correspondence reveals an almost meditative attention to detail, notes about decimals, questions about shelf arrangements, comments on how to improve accessibility. In these small, patient actions, one sees not just obsession, but a kind of quiet care for the world of books. Let's take a moment to reflect on the oddities of the system's spread. In some far-flung libraries, librarians would attempt to adapt the system to local knowledge, sometimes creating decimals for subjects Dewey had never imagined. Anthropology might expand to include local folklore. Natural history might subdivide into botanical curiosities, and music might grow into obscure instruments. And Dewey, while no longer personally arranging each card, had designed a system flexible enough to accommodate these variations. There is a gentle satisfaction in imagining him nodding quietly from the afterlife, whispering to the librarians, "Yes, that works." The subtle humor of the Dewey Decimal System is also worth noting. Consider the absurdity. Every imaginable topic assigned a number. Cooking has a decimal. Death has a decimal. Puppetry has a decimal. Even books that mix topics, science fiction with botany perhaps, must find their precise numeric home. It's orderly, logical, and just slightly amusing to contemplate. That blend of meticulous care and mild absurdity is part of what makes this story so ideal for slow, sleepy narration. Meanwhile, Dewey's personal life continued to reflect his methodical tendencies. He remained socially active, particularly with the Lake Placid Club, but his interactions were guided by strict routines and carefully planned schedules. Guests were expected to follow quiet hours, attend discussions, and sometimes participate in debates about cataloging standards. Imagine attending a summer retreat and being politely lectured on the placement of 641.5 versus 641.8 while the sun filters softly through tall windows. Calm, orderly, slightly odd, perfectly lulling. The legacy of Dewey also extended into education. Students of library science learned the decimal system as a core principle. They practiced cataloging, classified books, and debated decimals with the patient, subtle humor that Dewey's life exemplified. In this way, his influence persisted not only through the numbers themselves, but through the cultivation of a meticulous, careful approach to knowledge. Each librarian trained under his principles became a small guardian of order in an otherwise chaotic world. Even small public libraries benefited. Imagine a sleepy town with a tiny library where a child wanders in seeking a book on insects. Thanks to Dewey, the child knows exactly where to go. 595. Quietly, efficiently, without stress or panic. The system doesn't shout, it doesn't demand, it simply exists, a gentle structure that supports curiosity. And that, perhaps, is the most soothing aspect of Dewey's creation, its quiet, patient guidance, always present, always reliable. And so, As we meander softly through these imaginary libraries, past card catalogs and neatly numbered shelves, past the subtle debates and tiny disputes, we return to Dewey himself, a man of obsessive care, mild eccentricity, and enduring vision. Every number stamped on a book is a whisper of his presence, a reminder that in a noisy, unpredictable world, some things can be calm, orderly, and gentle. As your eyes grow heavier, imagine the decimal numbers floating softly before you. 000, 100, 200, 300, each one a quiet step deeper into the serene, organized world of libraries. Dewey's numbers are not just practical, they are comforting, meditative, and patiently waiting for the next sleepy visitor to wander their quiet, numbered corridors. All right, let's drift gently back into the calm, orderly world of libraries, where Melvil Dewey's decimals quietly reign supreme. By now, Dewey's system had not only transformed libraries in the United States, but was slowly, subtly, finding its way across the globe. So settle deeper into your pillow, let your breathing slow, and imagine the soft shuffle of cards and the faint smell of inked pages as we float through international library history. Europe, as we've touched on before, was cautiously intrigued. British libraries were among the earliest adopters outside the United States, though some traditionalists resisted the idea. There's a quiet satisfaction in picturing these debates. Librarians in London politely sipping tea while discussing whether anthropology should nestle comfortably under 301 or be slightly shifted elsewhere. Dewey, if he had been present, might have tapped his finger on the table and murmured, 301, obviously, with the calm authority only he could muster. Across the Atlantic, in continental Europe, libraries in Germany, France, and the Netherlands began experimenting with the decimal system. Librarians marveled at the simplicity and quiet logic. Some adapted it to fit their local knowledge traditions. For example, German libraries might have had a slightly expanded category for philosophy, while French libraries created nuanced decimals for literature. Dewey's genius was in designing a system flexible enough to accommodate these subtle variations without losing its essential order. Meanwhile, small local libraries in Asia and Canada began introducing Dewey's system as well. The pattern was consistent: initial curiosity, minor debates, gentle adaptation, and eventual adoption. It's almost hypnotic to imagine librarians in Tokyo or Toronto quietly moving through stacks, gently placing each book in its decimal home, occasionally glancing at colleagues with a soft sigh of approval when a particularly tricky classification was resolved. And speaking of tricky classifications, Dewey's system was full of them. Consider, for instance, interdisciplinary works, books that mixed science and art, literature and folklore, or history and geography. Librarians had to decide which decimal best represented the book's essence. Would a cookbook that included botanical illustrations go under 641.5 for cooking or 580 for botany? Decisions were deliberate, slow, and occasionally slightly absurd, but that is part of the charm. The careful consideration, the quiet thoughtfulness, the patience required, it's all very soothing to imagine. Dewey's personal quirks also persisted in his later years. He remained a stickler for efficiency, neatness, and subtle social rules. He continued to oversee the Lake Placid Club, where schedules were rigid but calm, and conversations occasionally revolved around whether a decimal should be adjusted slightly for a new topic. Guests at the club were expected to follow these rules, but in return, they received a serene, orderly environment, a place where ideas could flow quietly without distraction. Another gentle anecdote involves Dewey's interest in education. He believed that children should be introduced to order and organization early. In some schools, he encouraged the use of miniature card catalogs and simplified decimals to teach young students how to think logically and systematically. Imagine a classroom where tiny hands carefully place index cards into drawers, numbers aligning perfectly, students learning patience and precision almost by accident. It's a calm, meditative scene perfect for bedtime storytelling. Meanwhile, as the decades passed, the Dewey Decimal System quietly evolved. Subdivisions expanded, accommodating new fields like computer science, environmental studies, and modern media. The principle remained the same. Every book, every topic, every idea had a decimal, a number, a home. And through it all, Dewey's influence remained palpable, not through loud proclamations, but through the quiet, omnipresent order he had instilled in libraries worldwide. Consider the small, almost imperceptible impact on readers. Someone seeking a book on medieval weaving techniques could now locate it without wandering endlessly. A scholar could trace historical records with precision. A casual reader could explore interests ranging from astronomy to zoology without panic or frustration. The calm, steady guidance of Dewey's numbers, subtle, patient, persistent, was everywhere, quietly shaping how people experienced knowledge. And so, as we drift softly along shelves filled with neatly numbered books, card catalogs aligned like miniature city grids, and librarians moving slowly and methodically, we return to the gentle, obsessive genius of Dewey himself. He may have been eccentric, meticulous, and occasionally socially peculiar, but he left a legacy of calm, order, and quiet beauty. As you slowly sink deeper into sleep tonight, imagine the decimal numbers floating softly before you. 000 for general works, 200 for religion, 641.5 for cooking, each one a gentle nudge into a world of serene organization. Dewey's system is not just a practical tool, it's a soft, rhythmic lullaby for anyone who appreciates quiet, measured order in an otherwise unpredictable world. As the decades passed, Dewey's system continued to evolve. All right, let's drift softly back into the calm, meticulous world of Melvil Dewey. By this stage of his life, Dewey was no longer just the young, energetic librarian who meticulously arranged cards and debated decimal points. He was an elder statesman of libraries, a quiet giant in the world of knowledge, and, if you imagine it slowly enough, a kind of soothing presence in the otherwise chaotic landscape of human curiosity. Even in his later years, Dewey remained active. He continued to advise libraries, lecture on cataloging practices, and refine his system. His days were filled with correspondence, often politely correcting minor misclassifications or suggesting subtle adjustments to decimals. One can almost picture him sitting at a large wooden desk, sunlight streaming in, gently aligning a stack of cards while murmuring softly about the best placement for a new subject. It's hypnotic, really, an endless dance of order and care. Dewey also began receiving recognition for his work. Honors and awards came, though never too flashy or loud. He wasn't seeking fame. He sought order. But quietly, the world acknowledged his contributions. Conferences would mention him, journal articles cited him, and librarians across continents would silently nod in appreciation as they filed books under 520 or 640. It was subtle, understated recognition, perfectly fitting for a man whose life revolved around quiet precision. One particularly gentle story involves his continued influence on library education. Dewey believed that knowledge should be accessible to everyone, not just the elite. He encouraged public libraries, educational programs, and training for young librarians. Schools would implement miniature versions of his card catalog system, teaching children how to organize information from an early age. Imagine a classroom of children carefully inserting tiny index cards into drawers, numbers softly guiding their curious hands. It's calming, almost meditative, and a perfect scene for bedtime reflection. Dewey's system continued to evolve. New subjects emerged, from psychology and sociology to emerging sciences and modern technologies. Librarians adapted his principles to accommodate growth, creating decimals for topics Dewey could never have imagined. Yet the essence of the system remained intact, calm, patient, logical, and quietly omnipresent. The numbers became a rhythm, a gentle structure underlying the vast ocean of human knowledge. Dewey's personal quirks also remained present, subtly shaping the environment around him. He continued to be meticulous about schedules, efficiency, and proper procedure. Guests at his retreats or colleagues in his offices learned to move at a measured pace, to appreciate the small beauty of perfectly aligned cards and neatly arranged books. Even when disagreements arose about whether a particular work belonged in 395 or 398.2, the resolution was calm, deliberate, and always slightly humorous. Let's float for a moment over the global landscape. By now, Dewey's system was quietly embedded in libraries across continents. From Tokyo to London, Toronto to Paris, librarians practiced his principles, gently guiding readers along the soft paths of numerical order. Patrons could now locate books with ease, explore subjects without stress, and experience the quiet satisfaction of structure in a world that could otherwise feel chaotic. Dewey's influence was pervasive, but never loud. It was a gentle, omnipresent hum of organization. And there is a subtle philosophy in all this. Dewey believed that knowledge, when ordered carefully, could provide comfort, that every book, every idea, every decimal could have a place, a home, a gentle resting spot. In a world of noise, uncertainty, and disorder, his system offered calm. It whispered to readers, "You can find what you seek. Everything has its place." And perhaps that is why this story, perfectly suited for slow, sleepy narration, feels so soothing. Even Dewey's passing in 1931 was understated. He left behind a legacy not of grandeur, but of patient, careful, enduring order. The Dewey Decimal System remained, quietly guiding millions, shaping libraries, and offering the subtle, comforting rhythm of a world gently arranged. Imagine, if you will, rows upon rows of books, each one in its proper place, the soft shuffle of cards in drawers, the quiet hum of libraries around the globe. Dewey's presence lingers there, not in noise, not in drama, but in the gentle, persistent structure of knowledge itself. So tonight, as you drift deeper into sleep, let your mind float along the aisles of these serene libraries. Picture the decimals softly floating in front of you. 000, 100, 200, 641.5. Each one a gentle marker guiding you toward calm, toward quiet, toward a sense of order in the vast, endless sea of human knowledge. Melvil Dewey's legacy is more than a system. It is a meditation, a lullaby, a subtle promise that even in chaos, there can be calm. All right, let's drift gently back into the quiet, orderly world of libraries, where Melvil Dewey's decimals continue to guide every book, every card, every soft shuffle of pages. By now, the system was deeply embedded in libraries worldwide, but that doesn't mean the work, or the subtle dramas, had stopped. So fluff your pillow, take a slow breath, and let's meander through some particularly tricky classifications and calm anecdotes from librarian life. One of the more fascinating aspects of the Dewey Decimal System is the occasional decimal dilemma. Imagine a librarian confronted with a book that touches on multiple subjects, a historical cookbook, perhaps, or a novel that includes detailed botanical illustrations. Where should it go? 641.5 for cooking, 580 for botany, or somewhere else entirely? Librarians would debate quietly, aligning cards and weighing the content. It's not dramatic, but the subtle tension, the measured thoughtfulness, and the careful resolution all contribute to a slow, hypnotic rhythm, perfect for bedtime reflection. Then there's the gentle humor hidden in Dewey's structure. Consider books that seem to defy classification entirely. A whimsical collection of fairy tales about engineering. It might end up in 620.8 with an explanatory note tucked in somewhere else. A diary of a world traveler mixing personal musings, natural observations, and historical commentary could require a soft sigh from any librarian attempting placement. These moments, minor yet persistent, highlight both the system's rigidity and its flexibility, the kind of paradox that is oddly comforting. Libraries themselves became spaces of subtle, slow-moving drama. Librarians, devoted to order, often became slightly obsessive in their own right. Stories exist of individuals who would spend hours aligning books on a shelf, straightening spines with precise care. Others would quietly reclassify books for fun, testing the patience of their colleagues. And through it all, the Dewey Decimal System served as a calm, guiding framework. The soft rhythm of cards sliding into drawers, numbers being whispered softly, and books gently placed on shelves created an almost meditative environment. Dewey himself, of course, would have appreciated this careful attention. Even in his later years, he advised libraries, refined decimal placements, and quietly corrected misclassifications. He may have been eccentric, obsessive, and mildly intimidating, but his influence was calming in its precision. There's a subtle pleasure in imagining him sitting quietly, card in hand, aligning the universe, one decimal at a time. International adoption continued in slow, steady waves. Librarians in Europe, Asia, and Canada learned to adapt the system, occasionally adding small local variations while maintaining the essence of Dewey's structure. Readers could now navigate libraries with ease, exploring topics ranging from religion to zoology without frustration. The calm, subtle rhythm of the decimal numbers 000, 100, 200, 300 offered a reassuring structure in an unpredictable world. Even minor mistakes became gentle stories of library life. Misplaced books, slightly off decimals, or cards filed incorrectly could cause soft, polite discussions among staff. Imagine a librarian quietly sliding a book from 398.2 to 398.1, murmuring an apology to anyone who noticed, while a colleague simply nods in agreement. There is no shouting, no chaos, only the steady, persistent pursuit of order. It's almost meditative. And there's something philosophical here. The Dewey Decimal System, at its core, is more than numbers. It's a reflection of the human desire for structure, understanding, and calm. Each decimal is a small marker of patience, each shelf a quiet testament to careful thought. In libraries around the world, millions of books exist peacefully, guided by this gentle system, quietly reminding us that even in chaos, there can be order. So, as your eyes grow heavier, imagine yourself walking slowly down the aisles of a softly lit library. Card catalogs whisper gently in the background. Decimal numbers float lightly in your mind. 512, 641.5, 940, each one a soft, steady guide. Melvil Dewey's presence lingers in the quiet, in the careful alignment of books, in the subtle debates and gentle resolutions that make libraries places of calm reflection. By now, we can see the beauty of the system not just in practicality, but in its rhythm. It is orderly, deliberate, and slightly humorous in its meticulation. And perhaps as you drift closer to sleep, you can feel the subtle comfort of this numerical order wrapping around the vast, chaotic universe of human knowledge. All right, let's slowly return to the world of Melvil Dewey, gently winding down toward the final chapters of his long, meticulous journey. By this point, he had spent decades shaping the way people access knowledge, organizing millions of books, and quietly embedding order into libraries around the globe. So settle in, take a slow, calm breath, and imagine the soft rustle of pages, the whisper of card catalogs, and the soothing rhythm of numbers guiding every book to its place. Even in his later years, Dewey remained deeply involved in the libraries he had helped shape. He would correspond with librarians, offer suggestions, and refine his system, always gently, always patiently. There's something almost hypnotic about picturing him at his desk, a faint smile on his face, carefully aligning index cards, considering whether a minor adjustment to a decimal might improve clarity. The scene is calm, deliberate, and perfect for bedtime reflection. Dewey's personal quirks continued to shape his world. He maintained his insistence on efficiency, proper procedure, and subtle social rules. Guests at his retreats, such as the Lake Placid Club, would follow quiet schedules, attend mild discussions on cataloging, and participate in small but deliberate debates about classification. Imagine the gentle rhythm of the day, sunlight filtering through tall windows, soft shuffling of papers, and Dewey calmly observing, ensuring that everything remains in order. It is slow, soothing, and slightly amusing to picture. Internationally, Dewey's system continued to spread quietly. Libraries in Europe, Asia, and beyond adapted his principles to local contexts. Minor debates would arise about the placement of a book on local folklore or an interdisciplinary work, Librarians would discuss quietly, align cards with gentle care, and resolve discrepancies without drama or chaos. The subtle humor lies in the patient, almost meditative process. People carefully deciding where a book belongs in a system that seems rigid yet is flexible enough to accommodate nuance. Dewey's final reflections, as recorded in letters and notes, reveal a gentle philosophy about knowledge and order. He believed that if books were arranged logically, if knowledge were made accessible, it could calm the mind and inspire thought. The Dewey Decimal System was not just a tool, it was a way to introduce serenity and predictability into the vast, sometimes overwhelming sea of human information. It is fascinating in a quiet way to imagine him pondering this late at night, the soft glow of a lamp illuminating neat stacks of index cards. Even small, everyday stories of librarianship reflect Dewey's influence. A misfiled book corrected with care, a subtle adjustment to a decimal, a soft-spoken debate about classification. All of it contributes to the meditative rhythm of library life. It is not dramatic, it is not fast, it is slow, deliberate, and oddly comforting. Readers and librarians alike are gently guided through the order Dewey instilled, almost like a soft lullaby of logic and organization. And so, as we slowly drift through these imagined libraries, picture the calm corridors lined with neatly numbered books. Hear the faint shuffle of cards and the quiet murmur of librarians in gentle discussion. Feel the steady, patient rhythm of decimals floating softly before you. 000, 100, 200, 300. Each one a gentle nudge into a world of calm, predictable order. Dewey's presence lingers here, not through grand gestures, but through the subtle, pervasive structure he created, a quiet testament to the power of meticulous care. As your eyes grow heavier, allow yourself to imagine the soothing, meditative pattern of Dewey's numbers guiding every thought and every book. Imagine a world where each idea has a home, each curiosity finds its place, and even in chaos, there is quiet structure. This is the legacy of Melvil Dewey, calm, patient, obsessive, and enduring. A world organized in gentle, hypnotic decimals, ready to cradle the mind into rest. So tonight, as you drift closer to sleep, picture a library softly lit, the faint smell of paper and ink, and the quiet alignment of every book in its rightful decimal place. Dewey's numbers are not just a tool, they are a lullaby, a meditative guide, a subtle whisper of order and care across the world of knowledge. All right, let's quietly drift back into the world of Melvil Dewey and his meticulously ordered universe of numbers. By now, his system was not just a tool, it was a way of life for librarians and a subtle rhythm in the daily lives of readers. So settle in, take a slow, deep breath, and let's wander softly through anecdotes, quirks, and calm reflections on Dewey's legacy. Even decades after the system's creation, libraries produced small, sleepy stories of its influence. Consider a librarian in a small-town library who became slightly obsessed with aligning books. Every evening, after the patrons had left, she would walk the aisles, adjusting spines, ensuring decimals were perfectly arranged. She might hum softly or whisper numbers, as if the books themselves could listen. Dewey, if present, would have nodded approvingly, perhaps remarking dryly, "Efficiency is comforting, isn't it?" Then there were the minor misclassifications that became gentle puzzles. A book on folklore with a bit of historical context might end up in 398.2 or 900, depending on who was shelving it. Librarians would quietly debate, occasionally reclassifying, sometimes laughing softly at the absurdity of trying to fit human knowledge into tidy decimals. The system was rigid, yet flexible enough for these subtle, slow-moving dramas, and these small debates added charm, patience, and a touch of dry humor to the otherwise meditative rhythm of library life. Dewey himself, throughout his life, was a combination of meticulous order and eccentric habits. He advocated for spelling reform, precise schedules, and polite social conduct, sometimes insisting on rules that seemed minor but mattered greatly to him. Imagine a summer retreat at the Lake Placid Club, where guests were guided through discussions on cataloging, reminded gently to walk at the proper pace, and occasionally entertained by Dewey's subtle wit. Calm, structured, slightly amusing, and perfect for our bedtime narrative. Internationally, librarians adapted his system in ways that reflected local culture and knowledge. In some European libraries, minor subdivisions were added for philosophy or literature. In Asian libraries, local history and folklore found their precise decimals. Dewey's system, inherently flexible, accommodated these variations without losing its essential order. The calm rhythm of numbers persisted, gently guiding readers through an otherwise complex world. Even small public libraries benefited from this quiet structure. Picture a child in a sleepy town library searching for a book on insects. Thanks to Dewey, the child could walk directly to 595 without wandering endlessly or feeling lost. A student researching medieval cooking techniques could quietly browse 641.5 and find exactly what they needed. The system doesn't shout, doesn't demand, and doesn't hurry. It simply exists, a gentle, comforting structure amid the chaos of knowledge. And there is something philosophical here, something subtle and soothing. Dewey's numbers are more than practical. They are meditative. They remind us that even in a vast, sometimes overwhelming universe of information, there is order. Each book has a home. Each idea has a place. Each decimal is a soft whisper. It's okay. You can find what you seek. For the sleepy listener, this realization is calming, almost hypnotic. Dewey's life and legacy teach us the beauty of quiet obsession, gentle precision, and patient care. He was eccentric, meticulous, and occasionally socially peculiar, but these traits produced a system that has endured for more than a century. Every library visitor, from casual reader to dedicated scholar, experiences his subtle guidance every time they walk among neatly aligned books, follow decimal numbers, or pull a card from a drawer. So as you drift deeper into rest, picture yourself walking slowly along the calm aisles of a library, bathed in soft light. Decimal numbers float gently before your eyes. 000, 100, 200, 641.5. each one a step deeper into serenity. Dewey's presence is everywhere, not in noise, not in grandeur, but in quiet, deliberate, patient order. It is a lullaby of knowledge, a meditative embrace of structure, and a gentle reminder that even in the complexity of life, there can be calm. All right, let's slowly drift back into the serene world of Melvil Dewey and his quietly obsessive universe of decimals. By now, the system he created had spread across continents, subtly shaping the daily lives of readers, librarians, and students alike. So settle further into your pillow, take a long, deep breath, and let the soft rhythm of library life carry you gently along. Even as the decades passed, Dewey's influence remained quietly omnipresent. Libraries continued to hum with a meditative rhythm, cards sliding gently into drawers, decimals guiding every step, books resting neatly on their shelves. Minor disputes about classification, while occasionally amusing, were always resolved calmly, almost ceremoniously. There's a gentle humor in imagining librarians politely debating whether a book on mystical cuisine belongs under 641.5 or 398.2. Tiny dramas that add subtle charm to the otherwise tranquil library environment. Dewey's own quirks persisted throughout his life, quietly shaping the environment around him. He insisted on schedules, order, and efficiency, often accompanied by a dry, understated wit. Guests at his retreats were guided through discussions about cataloging and proper procedures, gently reminded to maintain calm decorum, and occasionally treated to subtle jokes about misplaced decimals or misaligned spines. The combination of precision and humor makes it easy to imagine the slow, comforting cadence of these interactions, perfect for bedtime reflection. Internationally, Dewey's system adapted gracefully to cultural variations. Libraries in Europe expanded certain subdivisions for literature, philosophy, or local history. Libraries in Asia and Canada introduced nuanced categories for folklore, natural studies, and modern subjects. And yet the essential principle remained: order, clarity, and quiet guidance. Each decimal was a subtle marker, a soft, gentle nudge pointing toward knowledge, curiosity, and understanding. Let's pause to reflect on the philosophical aspect of all this. The Dewey Decimal System is more than a practical arrangement of books. It is a meditation on order and patience. Each book, each decimal, each gently placed card represents the human desire for structure in an otherwise unpredictable world. Imagine walking slowly along a library aisle, numbers floating softly before your eyes. 100, 200, each one a step deeper into calm. Even the most distracted mind finds solace in the predictable rhythm of Dewey's system. There's also subtle humor in the obsessive care of librarians, guided by Dewey's principles. Minor errors, books placed slightly off, cards misfiled, a decimal debated, become little stories of human diligence. Librarians adjust, sigh softly, and carry on, maintaining calm order. Dewey's system accommodates these imperfections with quiet elegance. It is not rigid in a harsh way. It is precise, patient, and enduring. Even in Dewey's final reflections, there is a gentle lesson. He understood that knowledge, when organized thoughtfully, becomes accessible, calming, and even meditative. His system does not shout, does not demand, and does not rush. It simply exists, softly guiding anyone who seeks a book, a fact, or a quiet moment of learning. And that, perhaps, is the true legacy, a system that comforts the mind as much as it organizes information. So, as your eyes grow heavier, picture yourself wandering slowly through a softly lit library. Hear the faint hum of activity, the gentle shuffle of cards, the quiet alignment of spines, the calm footsteps of a librarian moving methodically among the shelves. Dewey's decimals float gently before you: 512, 641.5, 940, and beyond. Each number is a lullaby, each shelf a small haven of order in a noisy, chaotic world. Finally, allow yourself to imagine the vast global reach of Dewey's creation. Libraries across continents, millions of books gently resting in their proper places, readers discovering knowledge with ease, and the calm, meditative rhythm of decimals shaping minds and hearts alike. It is a subtle, quiet triumph, one that endures, softly, like the gentle whisper of a lullaby in the night. And with that, we drift into the final calm. Melvil Dewey's numbers, ever present, ever guiding, and perfectly ordered, carrying knowledge, curiosity, and quiet peace across time and space. All right, let's drift fully into the quiet, calm world of Melvil Dewey one last time. Imagine the soft shuffle of cards, the faint smell of ink and paper, and sunlight gently spilling across rows of neatly aligned books. By now, Dewey's decimals are everywhere, silently guiding every reader, every librarian, and every curious mind. Settle further into your pillow, take a long, slow breath, and let the gentle rhythm of numbers and order carry you toward rest. Even the smallest anecdotes of library life reflect Dewey's enduring presence. Librarians quietly align books at the end of the day, murmuring decimals under their breath. A misfiled book is gently corrected. A minor debate about classification is resolved calmly, and the system hums softly in the background. There is no chaos here, only patience, care, and the soothing rhythm of meticulous order. Dewey's own personality, precise, slightly eccentric, quietly witty, remains visible in this calm ecosystem. Imagine him walking slowly among the stacks, observing each card, each spine, each carefully numbered book, offering the faintest nod of approval. His presence is not loud or demanding. It is gentle, consistent, and comforting. The world of knowledge, vast and sometimes overwhelming, is made serene by his careful hand. Across the globe, Dewey's system continues to guide quietly. Libraries adapt to local culture and needs, adding subtle variations but always keeping the soft, meditative structure intact. Readers can walk along the aisles and find any book without stress or frustration. Each decimal number, 000, 100, 200, 512.5, 641.5, acts like a soft whisper. Everything has a place. You can find what you seek. It is a lullaby of logic, a meditation on patience, and a subtle reminder of calm. There is also a quiet humor in Dewey's legacy. The little human dramas of librarians, slightly misfiled books, delicate debates over decimal placement, gentle frustrations, become part of the soothing rhythm. It is precise, flexible, and endlessly forgiving. The system accommodates human imperfection while maintaining a sense of serenity, a soft hum beneath the vast expanse of human knowledge. As your eyelids grow heavier, picture yourself walking slowly along the quiet aisles of a library. The numbers float softly before your eyes, guiding your imagination. 000, 100, 200, 641.5, every decimal a small step deeper into calm, orderly serenity. Dewey's presence lingers everywhere, in the alignment of books, the gentle whispers of card drawers, and the soft, patient work of librarians around the globe. Dewey's legacy is simple, profound, and quietly comforting. His system is more than classification. It is a philosophy. Careful attention, patience, and order can bring peace. It guides readers and librarians alike, subtly whispering that in a world of chaos, there is always structure, always calm, always gentle guidance. So tonight, as you drift further into sleep, let the softly aligned books, the floating decimals, and Dewey's enduring calm carry you into rest. The world of knowledge is quiet, orderly, and welcoming, perfectly reflecting the meditative rhythm of Dewey's lifetime work. And with that, we leave the world of Melvil Dewey and the softly humming Dewey Decimal System, perfectly ordered, gently guiding, and serenely comforting, just like this slow, meditative story.